Often people imagine Israel and the Middle East to be this desert, desolate, camel-ridden land. But in reality, this is what Israel looks like. Most of this country is at the forefront of the technological world. But it wasn't always this way. Just a couple generations back, this country was way behind the rest of the world. And in a short span of time, brilliant people from around the world that have come to this land and invested have pulled us out of that place and into the forefront of the technological world.
Israel has earned its nickname as the Startup Nation. With around 6,500 active startups, Israel has the most startups per capita in the entire world. What's even more impressive is that per capita, it outranks every other country in the number of unicorns, or companies worth more than $1 billion. Today, Israel's tech industry makes up 9% of the workforce, and it shows no signs of slowing down.
We're heading towards Tel Aviv to meet with Yossi Vardi. And Yossi Vardi is, for all matters and effects, the father of the Israeli startup nation. I mean, this is the guy who's been here before anyone else. Whether he was a founder or he invested in them in the seed phase, this guy has been behind an endless list of successful startup ventures in this country. I wanted to talk a bit about you, Yossi, the person. What does the executive brief on Yossi Vardi sound like?
I was what is called today a nerd, a chnun. I worked in the development labs of the Ministry of Defense. After 2 years, I created one of the earliest software companies in Israel.
What year is this?
This was 69. In few years, it became the largest in Israel. Don't be too impressed, because when we reached 300 people, we were the biggest one. Eventually, I invested in like 86 different companies. 33 of them I've done exit. And not less important, 30 of my investment went bust, lost the money, were closed, created for me agony, embarrassment. As Truman said, if you cannot stand the heat, don't go to the kitchen.
Yossi is being modest.
Yossi told us the miracle. Said 2/3 search results, 1/3 ads. And there we have it.
In addition to founding Tekim, one of Israel's first and four-time largest software companies, he was prominent in the success of Answers.com, Israel's national oil company, several successful public companies, including Israel's largest energy company, and the world's first instant messaging software, ICQ, which sold to AOL in 1998 for $407 million.
The history of the high-tech in Israel starts in order to resolve critical national issues, not in order to do exits or to...
Not to make money.
Yeah.
Yossi's personal success is part of Israel's unprecedented history of going from 0 to 60, economically and technologically speaking, in a very short amount of time. And he took me through the entire story.
We had to develop agriculture in order to create food. We had to resolve the water issues, and we had major defense challenges. Then there was Yom Kippur War, which was a very traumatic war for us. So the army moved very fiercely and created what is known today the elite units of the intelligence. In the 90s, we began to see the high-tech as we know it today. The government realized the need to encourage international VCs to team with local financial people. This was the first big money which came to Israel.
In the 1990s, the tech scene here exploded, and it hasn't stopped growing. Many have speculated about the reasons for Israel's entrepreneurial success. But if you truly want to understand what created the startup nation, you have to look even deeper.
Just to give an idea of the scope of the phenomena, last year, the activity in Israel of startups measured by dollar sums was 1/4 of the total of Europe and Israel together.
Wow.
So we are a country of 9 million people.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's quite surprising. The question is what we have here that is not available in other countries, which create this very unique proposition. This has to do with the cultural DNA of the people, heritage, what the young kids get at home. And you have to remember that behind every Israeli kid, there is one of the mightiest forces in the world, and this is the Jewish mother, which push him from the age of 6 to go and excel. She don't forget to tell them, after all we have done for you, asking you to bring one Nobel Prize is really not too much. So that's the culture. This is how we grow. More than that, if you want to understand Israel, you have to think in tribal terms. We spend time in the army, which create this feeling of joint destiny, which force you to collaborate and to help other people.
We try to help those left behind enjoy the fruits of the Startup Nation. We focus on diversifying the Startup Nation by running programs for communities not taking part of the Startup Nation.
Who in Israel is underrepresented?
Like the Arab community, like the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. Women are also a social periphery.
What is the origin of this discrepancy?
One thing that we clearly see is the understanding of what entrepreneurship is. This lack of awareness definitely is what is keeping the Arab population of thriving in the ecosystem.
The Jewish ultra-Orthodox men and women we work with, they don't necessarily have the same education as someone from a different background. There's lack of connections, of course. So what we try to do is also link and bridge the communities that we work with the Startup Nation.
Many of the people from these diverse communities don't even know the opportunity exists and have no idea where to begin.
Our main program is our Accelerator, which is basically a very intense program for teaching practices of entrepreneurship.
The first thing that we do when we enter a new community is to recruit someone from the community. So a local coordinator or a program manager. And basically this person will do whatever it takes to get people to come to our events.
The diverse team at PresenTense are able to see the lack and bridge the gap.
We focus on having a strong sense of yourself and then what your startup is, while we try to start connecting them to people.
60% of the entrepreneurs who did go through our program have sustainable startups.
Hebrews 13:16 says, "Do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." PresenTense is doing just that, by sharing the knowledge and the path to startup success with all of Israel's population.
שבוע שעבר גייסנו $3 מיליון.
They have regular meetings with their participants to get updates and to encourage one another.
כשהגענו לפרזנטנס, הסבירו לנו שבעצם אנחנו לא השגנו כלום ואנחנו בנקודת ההתחלה, ואנחנו נתווכחנו, אמרנו, לא, אנחנו מוכנים. באמת היום אנחנו נמצאים במקום שיש לנו 3 מוצרים דיגיטליים שכבר אפויים וכבר עומדים באוויר, ואנחנו אפילו מרוויחים מהם כסף, אז זה לגמרי, בזכות פרזנטנס, לגמרי, סיפור הצלחה בסופו של דבר.
אתם סיפור הצלחה. אתם באמת סיפור הצלחה.
The team at PresenTense is really making an impact, and their program would no doubt be less impactful if Khouloud and Ariela were not driven by passion and personal motivation.
Up until 4 years ago when I began working at PresenTense, I had no idea what the Startup Nation was. I have 2 daughters. In the end of the day, I want my daughters to live in a place where they have the same equal opportunity that any kid who grows up in Tel Aviv has.
I have a philosophical question for you. Why does this organization exist?
We need to exist as long as the gaps exist, as long as there's such deep socioeconomic gaps in society. And any business world is a closed industry, an excluded industry. We need organizations like ours.
Thank you for joining us as we provide a spiritual insight of what God is doing in Israel and in the Middle East. If you want to learn more about what God is doing in Israel, make sure to visit us on our webpage and follow us on social media. Shalom, and God bless you from Jerusalem.